At 82, Linda finally reveals the painful truth that scars on her heart. Life is a journey filled with joy, love, and sometimes unbearable pain. For 82-year-old Linda, the weight of a secret she carried for decades has finally become too heavy to bear. Today, she opens her heart to reveal a truth so painful it has left scars that never fully healed. This is her story. Chapter 1. A childhood shrouded in silence. Linda's story begins in a small, forgotten town during the 1940s, a place where secrets were tucked beneath white picket fences and silence was more common than song. She was born into a household where appearances meant everything. The curtains were always neatly drawn, smiles were always practiced, and any sign of pain was quickly buried beneath polite conversation and forced laughter. From the outside, the family seemed pristine. Her father, a tall, stern man with silvered hair and an ironed suit, was revered by neighbors and respected in their community. He gave speeches at local gatherings, shook hands with authority, and never missed church on Sundays. But within the walls of their home, the truth wore a much darker shade. "My father was a respected man in our community," Linda remembers, her voice cracking with the weight of years she had spent holding in the truth. But behind closed doors, he was someone else entirely. The mask he wore in public never slipped in front of others. Only Linda and her mother knew the man who yelled with eyes full of rage and who punished with hands too eager to leave bruises. Her mother, frail in spirit, seemed always on the verge of speaking, but fear sealed her lips. She lived in a constant state of hesitation, moving like a ghost through the house, present but powerless. For Linda, the first wounds weren't visible. They came in the form of confusion, of shame, of silent nights spent curled up in bed, wondering what she had done wrong. "I thought if I just stayed quiet," she whispers, "if I was good enough, maybe the pain would stop." But it never did. The silence only deepened. She became an expert at hiding her emotions, learning how to smile on cue, how to make excuses, how to disappear without ever leaving the room. And through it all, she held on to one fragile hope, that maybe, just maybe, someday, things would change. But childhood doesn't last forever. Eventually, Linda would be forced to choose between the safety of familiarity and the terrifying unknown of freedom. And the path she chose would shape her in ways she could never have imagined. Chapter 2. The Love That Wasn't Meant to Last. At 19, Linda believed she had finally found her escape. A doorway out of the shadows of her childhood and into something new, something bright. His name was Robert. He was charming in all the ways young girls dream of, a warm smile, a deep voice, eyes that held stories, and a presence that made the world feel less cold. To Linda, he was a lifeline. She didn't just fall in love, she clung to it like it was the only thing keeping her from drowning. "He had this way of looking at me," she recalls softly, eyes glancing toward the distance. "Like I was the only person in the room, like I mattered." And for a time, she did feel like she mattered. The attention, the promises, the plans they made under starlit skies. It all seemed like the life she had never dared to wish for. For a girl who grew up walking on eggshells, being seen felt revolutionary. But fairy tales have a cruel habit of withering when exposed to the truth. And Robert had his own storm raging beneath the surface. It started small, missed dinners, sudden mood swings, apologies wrapped in bouquets. But soon the cracks grew wider. Whiskey bottles hidden beneath the bed, nights he didn't come home, days he wouldn't speak, and when he did, It was with words sharper than knives, and sometimes with fists that left marks no makeup could cover. I told myself, maybe I deserved this too, Linda admits, her voice shaking. I had been broken for so long, I didn't know what love was supposed to feel like anymore. She tried to fix it, to fix him. She tried to be softer, more understanding, more patient. But the more she gave, the less of herself she had left. Every outburst chipped away at her spirit, every bruise another reminder that she was becoming her mother's reflection. The silence that once kept her safe had now become her prison. Then came the night she'll never forget. The shouting was louder, the anger more violent. It ended with her heart pounding, her hands trembling as she packed a suitcase with whatever she could carry. Her body was sore, but her spirit was screaming, enough. She walked through the night, guided not by direction, but by desperation. She arrived at the doorstep of a women's shelter just before dawn, the sky a deep blue, mourning her past. She clutched her suitcase like it contained more than clothes, like it held the last pieces of her soul. A kind woman opened the door, and for the first time in years, Linda felt a small flicker of safety. She was lost, yes, but she had walked away. And in that quiet act of bravery, the long road to healing had begun. Chapter 3. The Child. She couldn't keep. The deepest scar on Linda's heart wasn't one that came from fists or harsh words. It came wrapped in innocence, with tiny hands and eyes that mirrored her own. A baby girl, a soul so pure, so dependent, that Linda felt, for the first time, a fierce kind of love she never knew existed. She named her Emily. Just speaking the name, even now, sends a wave of emotion crashing through her. "Her name was Emily," she whispers, her voice breaking as tears trace familiar paths down her aged cheeks. "I was so young, so broken. I wanted the world for her, but all I had was a suitcase of regrets and a heart full of fear." It was the 1960s, a time when unwed, struggling mothers were pressured into silence. Closed adoptions were swift and final. No goodbyes, no photos, no future contact. Linda was told it was the right thing to do. That love sometimes meant letting go, that Emily would have a better life, a real family, stability. But those assurances did nothing to quiet the hollow ache in her chest. "I remember holding her one last time," she says, "and promising her, somehow, some way, I'd never stop loving her. But they took her, and then she was just gone." For 60 years, Linda lived with that absence like a missing limb. Every birthday that passed, she wondered, did someone bake her a cake? Did she get the pony she once dreamed of? Did she know deep down that somewhere out there was a mother who had never stopped carrying her in her heart? The questions never ended. They only grew louder with age. Then, 2 years ago, something happened that shattered her carefully guarded silence. A letter arrived. The envelope was plain, the handwriting unfamiliar, but the name written on the top corner sent a shockwave through Linda's body. When I saw her name on the envelope, Emily, I froze. My hands shook so badly I could barely open it. I was afraid it was a dream or worse, that she hated me. But inside was a message filled with grace. Emily had spent years searching. She had questions, yes, but more than that, she had hope. Hope that the woman who had given her life might still be out there. Hope that the bond broken by time and pain might still be mended by truth and love. For Linda, that letter wasn't just paper. It was resurrection. A second chance she never dared to ask for. A whisper from the past finally answered. Chapter 4. The reunion that came too late. Meeting her daughter for the first time in over 60 years was supposed to be a moment drenched in joy, a long-awaited reunion that would stitch together the torn fabric of two lives. Linda had imagined it 1,000 different ways. In some dreams, they met in a sunlit cafe. In others, they embraced beneath a rain-kissed sky. Every version ended the same: smiles through tears, laughter wrapped in love, and a future where the past finally loosened its grip. But fate, it seems, had one final cruelty to offer. She was sick, Linda says, her voice cracking under the weight of words she never wanted to speak. By the time we found each other, the doctors said she only had a few months left. Emily had been battling an aggressive illness in silence, just as Linda had once endured her own silent suffering. Perhaps it was fate's way of mirroring their lives. Two women separated by decades, each shaped by pain they didn't deserve. But even in the face of such devastating news, Linda didn't run. For the first time in her life, she let herself truly fall apart, but not in fear. In love. She moved into Emily's small apartment, where sunlight filtered softly through sheer curtains and old books lined the shelves like quiet companions. There were no grand declarations, no frantic attempts to make up for lost time. There was simply presence. Quiet mornings, shared glances, the comfort of being near. Linda held her daughter's hand every day, tracing the lines of a life she never got to witness. I told her everything, Linda whispers, about the day she was born, about the lullabies I used to hum to myself just to feel close to her. I apologized for not being strong enough back then. I begged for her forgiveness, even when she told me she had already given it. Some days were filled with stories, Emily asking about her birth, her father, what Linda had dreamed of when she was young. Other days were silent, the kind where grief lingered in the air like dust. But even on the worst days, Linda stayed. She had missed so much, but now, in these final chapters, she would not miss a single moment. And then, one quiet afternoon, as Linda brushed Emily's hair and whispered an old lullaby she'd never had the chance to sing before, her daughter looked up with tired eyes and said the word Linda had waited her entire life to hear. She called me Mom the day before she passed, she says, her voice trembling with sorrow and grace. Just once, that was enough. It was more than a name. It was a healing, a closing of a wound that had ached for decades. And though Linda's heart shattered anew as she held her daughter for the last time, she also felt something unfamiliar. Peace. Because in those final days, they had finally found each other. Chapter 5. The truth that set her free but couldn't heal the scars. Now at 82, Linda sits alone in her modest apartment, sunlight warming the faded rug, the kettle gently whistling on the stove. Her walls are lined with photographs, some of family, others of places she once visited, but most are quiet testaments to a life lived in the space between sorrow and strength. In one corner rests a small wooden frame, inside a picture of Emily, her smile frozen in time, her eyes mirroring Linda's own. I spent so many years pretending I was fine, Linda says, her voice now soft but unwavering. I smiled when I wanted to scream. I laughed when I was breaking inside, because that's what I was taught. To survive, not to feel. And survive she did. Through the bruises, the heartbreaks, the empty nursery, and the long years of wondering. But survival is not the same as healing. It took her a lifetime to understand that. Healing, she learned, begins when you stop hiding from your story. Some scars, she admits, gently tracing the wrinkles on her hand. They don't fade. And that's okay. They're part of me now. Proof that I lived, that I endured, and that somehow I still had love left to give. She doesn't offer her story as a tragedy, not anymore. Instead, She shares it as a gift, a small lantern held out in the dark for anyone else still stumbling through their own silence. Her message, though quiet, carries the weight of a lifetime. "Don't wait as long as I did to face your pain," she says, leaning forward, as if speaking directly to the hearts of strangers. Secrets don't protect you. They don't keep the monsters away. They just make the wounds deeper and lonelier. Linda's journey isn't wrapped in a perfect ending. Her daughter is gone. Her youth was stolen, but she is still here. Still learning, still forgiving, still trying to be gentle with herself. And that, perhaps, is the bravest thing of all. Her story reminds us that even the strongest hearts carry hidden scars, that the smile of a stranger might be masking decades of pain, and that truth, when spoken out loud, has the power to soften even the hardest edges of grief. So if her story touched something inside you, say something in the comments, in your journal, or even just in a whisper to yourself, because sometimes the first step toward healing isn't a grand gesture. It's simply saying, "This hurt me, and I'm still here, and whatever battle you're fighting, be kind to yourself, to others. You never know what someone else is carrying behind their smile." Would you like any emotional tones intensified or any sections expanded further? This story is crafted to deeply resonate with listeners while maintaining respect for Linda's real pain. Let me know how you'd like to refine it.